I've got a couple of students that are here, and hold on just a second. I need to make sure that the audio is working. So time out 1 second. Forgive me, guys. So I'm gonna go. All right. I've got a couple of students that are here that are. We're talking about the precipitation lab that we did, and we're doing reaction I on your grid sheet, which is the reaction between sodium sulfate in aqueous solution and lead to nitrate in aqueous solution. Now, both of those are in aqueous solution. That's obvious from the fact that we dripped them together at the beginning of the lab. And so what we want to do is predict what the products of this reaction would be. And so, what are the two possibilities once these things trade partners? Sodium nitrate is one, and lead 2 sulfate. And so lead 2 sulfate. Now, the first thing we have to do is decide whether or not either one of these products is going to be an insoluble compound and is going to drip out of solution. And so what do? We go to our reference tables. And what do the rules tell us about sodium nitrate? Yeah, all nitrates are soluble, all group 1Al compounds are soluble, and so on a double whammy, we got this is definitely the sodium nitrate. That is definitely in aqueous solution. What about the lead sulfate? Lead 2 sulfate. Okay, all sulfates are soluble except for, and one of the except fors is lead 2. And so that tells us that this is going to be a solid precipitate. If that is a solid precipitate, then if we are doing question number 4, letter I on your lab sheets, what you're doing is writing a complete ionic equation for this reaction. And with a complete ionic equation, what do we do? How do we break this apart? Anything that is in aqueous solution gets divided into the appropriate ions. And so sodium sulfate is in aqueous solution, lead nitrate was in aqueous solution, and we decided that the sodium nitrate at the end is also going to be in aqueous solution. But the lead 2 sulfate is not. That's a solid. So the complete ionic equation is going to be sodium ions plus sulfate polyatomic ions. And if we don't remember what the charge is, we can look at our reference tables. Plus lead 2 ions. And we know that that is lead 2 because nitrate, which it's partnered up with, has a 1 minus charge, but there are 2 of them. So the lead has to have a 2 plus. And then, of course, the nitrate, as we just mentioned, has a 1 minus charge. And then on the products side of this reaction, we have the the sodium nitrate in aqueous solution. And so that also gets broken apart into its ions. But the lead sulfate we write as a solid precipitate. And so that's how we do number 4. That's an example of one of the various equations that we would do in number 4 on the lab report, the lab sheet. If we were doing the net ionic equation, which is number 5, and we're still doing reaction I, the net ionic equation, what do we do? With the net ionic equation, we eliminate the spectator ions. Anything that didn't actually participate in the reaction gets knocked out. And so the way I'm going to do that is by marking it on the reaction as we actually wrote it up here above. Is sodium unchanged from the reactant side to the product side? Yes, it is. And so sodium, since it's an ion in the reactants and in the product, it's a spectator. It didn't do anything. It gets dropped out. What about the sulfate? Yeah, sulfate didn't just watch. Sulfate participated because it's an ion in the reactants, but it's in the compound in the product, so we have to leave it alone. What about the lead? Yeah, same thing with the lead. Ion in the reactants, it's in the compound in the products, so we leave it alone. And the nitrate? Yeah, nitrate's a spectator, so the nitrate goes away. And so after we have eliminated all of the spectator ions, we write what's left. And what we have is actually the only thing that happened in this reaction is that sulfate polyatomic ions combined with lead 2 plus ions to produce lead 2 sulfate as a solid precipitate. Now notice in the products, the order in which you write the ions is very important. In the compound, the metal, the positively charged ion always comes first, so it's lead 2 sulfate. Over here in the reactants, we have the sulfate written before the lead. That's okay, it doesn't matter. It's kind of a normal form to put the lead first in the reactants also, because that's the way it's going to end up in the products. But it doesn't matter. What you're saying is, hey, sulfate ions combined with lead ions, and they formed lead 2 sulfate.